Chapter 1, Lesson 1 on variables and expressions. So the first thing we're going to look at is what is an algebraic expression? And an algebraic expression is just sums and or products of numbers and variables. So anytime we have numbers and variables being added, multiplied, they can be subtracted. Remember, that's just adding the opposite, or divided, because that's just multiplying by the reciprocal. That's an algebraic expression. So some examples would be like 15x, right? It means 15 times x. Or 3m minus 8. Or 5 minus 2 over x. Or ab. Or 4m divided by 6ac. All right, those are all algebraic expressions. Okay, you're not going to see an equal sign. Now, variable that we just talked about is just a symbol used to represent numbers or values. Variables are usually letters. In algebra, that's what we usually see them represented as. Okay, so next thing we're going to look at is what's a term and how do we express multiplication. So a term is just any expression, a number, a variable, or a product or quotient of numbers and variables. So a number, it could be -3, that's a term. It could be x, that's a term. It could be 5ab to the second power. That's a product of numbers and variables. Okay, those are all examples of terms. Now, what are some different ways that we show multiplication? Before I write them down, I want you to think of how could you show two different ways, or not two, lots of different ways. How could you show some ways to multiply, let's say, x times y? How would you show that? Think algebra. Okay, pause the video and you write down as many as you can come up with. Okay, so now you've tried. Let's look at some. We can just write x, y. That's the simplest way. We don't have to put anything in between it. We can also put x with a little dot between it times y. We can put x parentheses y. We can put the x in parentheses times y. Or we could actually have them both in parentheses. What we don't want to write in algebra is a little x in between them to show multiplication because we often use variables. Alright, now powers. Powers are just a shorter way of writing multiplication. So just a little vocabulary. The 5 here, the big number, we call the base. The little 3 up here, we call the exponent. And then all of this together, we call a power. Okay, there's different ways that we can read those. We can read 5 to the third power. We can read 5 to the power of 3. And there's a couple times that we can have a little shortcut. When it's the third power, we can say 5 cubed. If there's a 2 up there, we can say squared. But other than that, there's no shortcut. If a number does not have a power, if we just have 8, it has a power. We just don't see it. It has a power of 1. It means the same thing. Okay, so let's talk about how we would write these. A verbal expression. How would I show this? So if I have 3x to the 4th power, I would say 3 times x to the 4th power. Okay? I don't have to put x to the 4th power first because my order of operations would tell me to do that first, and then times 3. If I was doing the 4th power to the 3x, I would say the product of 3 times x to the 4th power. All right? So 5a squared plus 16. So what I'm going to say is 5 times a to the 2nd power plus 16. Alright, now I want you to again pause the video and I want you to come up with any words that when you look in a word problem or words that when you see them you know mean addition, subtraction, multiplication, or division. So fill in at least one number under each of those on your chart. Okay, let's see what you came up with. So for addition, one of the important words that we write is sum. If you didn't put those words, pause the video again and write them under those categories. For subtraction, the answer is called the difference. For multiplication, it's called the product. And for division, it's called the quotient. Those 4 words are very important that you know and that you understand which one goes with which. Okay, now let's talk about addition. We also usually use the phrase more than, and when we subtract, we use less than. Okay, we also use plus and minus, and sometimes we say increased and decreased. Okay, those are our most common words that we use. For multiplication, a big one that we see is this little word of. We also use times. For division, we usually see quotient, or we even will just see the simple words divided by. Obviously, that can go with the others. Subtracted from, added to, multiplied by. But divided by is what we see a lot of times for division. Sometimes also if we're talking about putting things into groups or splitting it up. When we talk about translating, we're taking those verbal expressions and writing them into an algebraic expression. A big hint to remember is that when we see less than, right, we know that it means subtract, but we also want to make sure that we change the order. So if it says 6 less than a number, we don't put 6 minus x. It's x minus 6. Also, in multiplication, if we are multiplying a number and a variable, the number always comes first. So we always say 6a, not a6. Okay, so 6a is the correct way to write it. So let's do a little translation. If we have a number t more than 6, we're going to take that number t and we're going to add 6 to it. Okay? We can also say that as 6 plus t if I want. Either way is fine. 2/3 of the volume V. So we're going to take 2/3 V times. We don't have to show a dot. We don't have to show parentheses. Just multiply. And 10 less than the product of 7 and D. So I have 10 less than. So I'm going to have something minus 10. And what is that something? The product. So I'm going to multiply 7 and D. So 7D minus 10.